Bought and paid for. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Now, every now and then, a young person will pose a question that exposes the intellectual laziness and arrogance of an adult used to coasting on old connections. Such was the case recently at the University of Chicago, which hosted an event called Disinformation and the Erosion of Democracy. Watch how a college freshman gets panelist writer Ann Applebaum to reveal her willingness to cover up for the Bidens.
So in 2020, you wrote, "Those who live outside the Fox News bubble do not, of course, need to learn any of the stuff about Hunter Biden," referring to his laptop, of course. A poll later after that found that if voters knew about the content of the laptop, 16% of Joe Biden voters would have acted differently. Do you think the media acted inappropriately when they instantly dismissed Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation?
My problem with Hunter Biden's laptop is I think it's totally irrelevant. I mean, it's not whether it's disinformation or, I mean, I don't think the Hunter Biden's business relationships have anything to do with who should be president of the United States. So I don't find it to be interesting.
Of course she doesn't think it's irrelevant. She's just another self-appointed elite who's far more worried about threats to Europe than threats to the United States. And not to be outdone by a fellow never-Trumper, a former conservative, Jonah Goldberg, says that even if big tech and the media colluded to censor the Hunter Biden story, it was no big deal.
They now think that if only the media had told us about the laptop at the time, as the kid yesterday was suggesting, which I don't buy his theory, that Trump would have won. But for the censoring of the New York Post, Trump would have won. And I think it's a preposterous counterfactual.
And to think that he once wrote a book called Liberal Fascism. I wonder what he thinks of that book today. Now, Goldberg conveniently fails to mention the polls showing 16% of Biden voters would not have voted for him had they known about the true Hunter Biden story. The only good thing, in fact, that came out of this conference were the young journalists who had the courage to call out the media's glaring hypocrisy. The folks on stage are all friends with high flyers in big tech and on Wall Street and who make billions in China. And they don't want our government to do anything to upset their cash flows. They're bought and paid for.
Now China plays a leadership position for the world in many different areas.
China, the whole region, is a very, very exciting place.
你们可以成为全球领导者，可以提高人们的生活，可以用互联网。
What a dweeb. Now, it's no wonder that the defense industry and the journalists who nurse at the CCP's bosom save their hawkishness for Russia or maybe the Middle East. They won't advocate for the U.S. decoupling from China, even as they acknowledge the ongoing threat that China poses.
There is just no country that presents a broader threat to our ideas, our innovation, and our economic security than China.
Okay, he's right. So why aren't they laying out a strategy to counter this? Where's the Biden administration's promised pivot to Asia? Well, don't hold your breath. General Milley testified that the Ukraine conflict will be unfolding for years. Meanwhile, as we blow through untold billions in Eastern Europe, China is working overtime to marginalize and ultimately eclipse the United States militarily and economically. Now, when word got out that Nancy Pelosi was considering an official visit to Taiwan, China brazenly warned her off.
If House Speaker Pelosi visits Taiwan, it will seriously violate the One China principle and seriously impact the political foundation of U.S.-China relations. China is firmly opposed to this.
Now, China would never dare take that threatening a posture under Trump. We know they would not. But with Biden, they feel like they have all the leverage, and basically they do. And years ago with Hunter Biden, they saw an easy target. Who better than a ne'er-do-well son of a sitting vice president than this situation?
My computer like taking tons of like just left the, like that cam on. He would always put it. Like, he had my like passcode and all that kind of shit. You know what I mean? And it was like, I mean, like crazy. And somebody stole them during that period of time. And he, like, they did like this kind of pretend search. I think he's the one that stole my computer. I think the three of them, the three guys, that were like a little like group. I deal with it, and these two guys. I don't know, like, I took them everywhere.
It was an easy setup to get some CCP-connected company to put him on the payroll and hope that some of that money would ultimately trickle down to a principal, aka the big guy, Joe Biden. Now, could this explain, at least partially, why Biden has still not unveiled a sensible China strategy? Why he's not held China accountable at all for its destruction of the evidence at the Wuhan lab?
House Republicans are claiming that they have significant circumstantial evidence that COVID-19 originated in a lab. Has the White House seen any circumstantial evidence that it did not originate in a lab?
Well, I think first I would caution you against disproving a negative there, which is never the responsible approach in our view when it comes to getting to the bottom of the root causes of a pandemic that has killed hundreds of thousands of people in the United States.
She should put out a Best of Lies album. That would be a big hit. Now, we're learning more every day about what was on that laptop. And according to whistleblower Jack Maxey, who gained access to the hard drive, there's a lot more where that came from. Here's what he told DailyMail.com.
And ultimately, we found 450 gigabytes of what Hunter thought was erased material. Amongst those things were 80,000 images and videos. Now, since then, we found thousands and thousands of PDFs we didn't know about. We believe that we've been able to scrape all the attachments. We keep finding more and more things. And so that became quite horrifying.
Horrifying. Ah, nothing to see here. It's only our most dangerous adversary getting money to the son of the man who was helping run our China policy at the time. Now, we know Biden is capable of condemning foreign assaults against human liberty when he wants to.
We're going to keep raising the economic cost and ratchet up the pain for Putin and further increase Russia's economic isolation.
But on President Xi's relentless assault on human rights in China, barely a peep. And why aren't we using our leverage to actively deter him from continuing to support Russia?
I had a very straightforward conversation with Xi. Made it clear to him, I made no threats, but I made it clear to him that make sure he understood the consequences of him helping Russia.
Wow, I bet that really scared him, boss. The plain truth is, without Xi's financial backing, Russia wouldn't be able to wage a war in Ukraine. Yet something is holding Biden back from forcefully warning China not to fund Russia's brutal rampage. What could that something be? Does the media even care? The U.S. Attorney in Delaware currently is investigating Hunter's laptop. Maybe he'll shed some light on this. How much did Hunter rake in from the fake work he did for the Chinese energy company? And what promises, explicit or implicit, did he have to make to seal the deal? And did some of that cash end up benefiting his father in some way? Now, contrary to what Ms. Applebaum contended, these questions are very relevant. With the exception of the Washington Post, which urged a media reckoning over their 2020 bearing of the Hunter Biden laptop story, most of the press simply don't care. No one really on the left is willing to take the steps to isolate China, even as the CCP is the invisible hand that helps fund Russian aggression in Ukraine. The reason China doesn't take Biden seriously is because they think of him as someone who is on their payroll. If Hunter Biden were being paid off by, let's say, Putin-controlled businesses, everyone at the University of Chicago Forum would care, and care a lot. Yet the fact is, they just don't believe that getting paid off by the CCP is that big of a deal. Think of it this way. January 6th is a threat to democracy worthy of a 2-year-long investigation. But China's vision to dominate the globe, their shocking human rights abuses, and financial payoff to the Biden family isn't? And that's the angle.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.